The slap echoed like a gunshot through the mess hall. Staff Sergeant Jake Harmon's palm connected with the back of her head so hard that Sarah Calloway stumbled forward, her tray crashing to the floor. Coffee exploded across the linoleum in a dark brown starburst. A bread roll bounced twice before settling against a table leg. A plastic fork skittered beneath a chair and disappeared. She was 22 years old, 5'4". Long dark brown hair cascading past her shoulders in waves that caught the overhead fluorescent light. Her olive green V-neck shirt clung to her small frame like it had been issued to someone slightly larger, which it had. Her military camouflage pants were standard issue, unremarkable, the kind worn by 10,000 other service members on 10,000 other bases across the United States. What Jake Harmon did not see was the thin titanium chain tucked beneath that shirt. He did not see the Navy SEAL trident hanging from it, one of fewer than 60 ever awarded to women in the history of the United States military. He did not see the 2 dog tags that clinked softly against that trident with every step she took, every breath she drew, every nightmare that jolted her awake at 3 in the morning with the taste of gunpowder and blood on her tongue. He had just made the worst mistake of his military career. He just didn't know it yet. The mess hall at Fort Braxton held 212 people at capacity. That Thursday afternoon, it held 147. Sarah had counted them when she walked in. She always counted. It was not a habit. It was not a quirk. It was the kind of behavior that got drilled into your nervous system after years of entering rooms where the wrong count meant the difference between walking out alive and being carried out in a bag. Exits. 4. 2 standard doors on the east and west walls. 1 emergency exit near the kitchen. 1 loading dock entrance propped open with a rubber wedge to let in the September air. Potential weapons within arm's reach. 9. The metal tray she'd been carrying. A butter knife on the table to her left. A glass coffee pot on the serving line 12 feet away. A fire extinguisher mounted on the wall behind her. A chair that could be swung. A mop handle leaning against the far wall. The edge of the table itself steel reinforced, sharp enough to open skin. Her own hands. Her own elbows. Threats requiring immediate attention. 0. Until Jake Harmon decided to change that number. She'd been eating alone in the back corner the way she always did. Position selected for maximum situational awareness. Wall at her back. Clear sight lines to all 4 exits. A column on her left that broke up her silhouette and made her harder to spot from the main entrance. Not that anyone was looking for her. That was the point. She was invisible here, and invisible was exactly what she wanted to be. Grilled chicken that had seen better days sat on her tray beside rice that clumped together like wet cement and green beans boiled into a state of complete nutritional surrender. Standard military fare. She ate with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had learned a long time ago that meals were fuel, not pleasure. Someone who had eaten MREs in a Somali basement while listening to gunfire 3 floors above and the wet, ragged breathing of a man dying in her arms. Jake Harmon had been watching her for 16 days. She knew this because she had been watching him watch her. That was what operators did. They cataloged threats before threats became problems. They mapped patterns of behavior the way cartographers map terrain, looking for ridges and valleys, choke points and dead zones, places where danger gathered like water in a low spot. Jake was 6'3", 235 pounds of gym muscle and unearned confidence. He had a regulation high and tight haircut that made his head look like a flesh-colored bullet. A jaw that looked like it had been chiseled from an army recruitment poster. Eyes that tracked her movements with the kind of predatory focus she had seen in men who hurt people, not because they had to, but because they enjoyed the way it made them feel. He was 28 years old. 8 years in the Army Rangers. 3 deployments to Afghanistan. 0 humility. The kind of soldier who confused volume with valor and size with strength. The kind who had never been truly tested and therefore believed himself untestable. He had started with comments. Loud enough for her to hear. Quiet enough for plausible deniability if anyone with authority happened to be listening. Day 3. Check out the squid. Thinks she belongs here. Day 7. Navy sends their females to do a soldier's job. That's why we're losing wars. Day 12. Bet she's never seen anything more dangerous than a paper cut. Day 16. The slap. Sarah had ignored all of it. Not because she was afraid. Fear was a chemical reaction she had learned to override before she turned 20. Not because she couldn't respond. She could respond in ways that would leave Jake Harmon eating through a straw for 6 months and questioning every assumption he had ever made about what small women were capable of. She ignored it because responding meant revealing. Revealing meant questions. Questions meant her carefully constructed cover would collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. And she had promised herself, had promised a dying man in a dark basement on the other side of the world, that there would be no more violence unless lives depended on it. But Jake Harmon was not going to let her keep that promise easily. The mess hall had gone silent after the slap. 146 people frozen in mid-bite, mid-conversation, mid-breath. Sarah stood slowly from where the impact had driven her forward. Very slowly, the way a coiled spring unwinds before it snaps. There was rice on her olive green shirt, a smear of gravy on her sleeve, a cut on her lower lip where it had caught the edge of the table. She could taste copper. She could feel the heat spreading across the back of her skull where his hand had landed. She turned to face him. Something in her eyes made Jake Harmon take a half step back. It was involuntary, instinctive, the way prey animals respond to predators they don't consciously recognize. He didn't even realize he'd done it, but his buddy Corporal Derek Nolan noticed. Corporal Lisa Pemberton noticed. Half the mess hall noticed a man who outweighed her by more than 100 pounds retreat from a woman who hadn't raised her voice or clenched her fists or done anything at all except look at him. Sarah didn't say a word. She just looked at him with eyes that had seen things Jake Harmon couldn't imagine in his worst nightmares. Then she reached up and touched the thin titanium chain at her throat, tucked it more securely beneath her collar, and walked out. No confrontation, no threats, no tears. Just that look and the click of her boots on linoleum, and 146 people watching a small woman leave a room with more dignity than most generals carry into a war. Jake's laugh broke the silence. Too loud. Too forced. The laugh of a man trying to convince himself and everyone around him that what had just happened was exactly what he'd intended. "That's right, Squid. Run back to your ship." Derek Nolan high-fived him. The mess hall slowly returned to its normal rhythm of conversation and silverware, and the dull business of eating food that tasted like obligation. But not everyone was laughing. Master Sergeant Frank Owens had been sitting 3 tables away, eating his lunch and pretending to read a training manual on forward operating base security. Owens was 58 years old, a face like weathered leather stretched over granite, gray at the temples, calm, watchful eyes that had seen deserts burn and cities fall and good men die in places the evening news never mentioned. He was a veteran of Desert Storm, 3 deployments to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan. He had spent 14 months attached to a Joint Special Operations Command task force in Fallujah, living and working alongside the most elite warriors the United States military had ever produced. He knew operators when he saw them. The way they moved. Economy of motion, nothing wasted, every step deliberate. The way they sat. Always with their back to a wall, always facing the door, always positioned for rapid response. The way they processed information. Eyes that never stopped scanning, never stopped calculating, never stopped running. Threat assessments that operated below the level of conscious thought like a computer program that couldn't be shut down. The Navy woman Jake Harmon had just assaulted moved like an operator. She sat like an operator. She ate like an operator, fast and efficient fuel, not pleasure, her non-dominant hand always free. And when she had looked at Jake Harmon, she had looked at him the way an operator looks at a target while deciding whether it's worth the ammunition. Owens pulled out his phone, typed a message to an old friend at Naval Special Warfare Command, a man he had served with in Fallujah, a man who now sat behind a desk at Coronado and had access to files that most people didn't know existed. Need a favor. Background check on Petty Officer First Class Sarah Calloway, currently assigned Fort Braxton, California. Intelligence support billet. Something doesn't add up. The response came back in 4 minutes. 4 minutes that told Owens everything he needed to know, because routine background checks didn't generate 4-minute response times. Routine background checks didn't generate responses like this one. That file is above your pay grade, Frank. Way above. Stop asking questions. Owens stared at his phone for a long moment. Then he looked at the door Sarah Calloway had walked through and decided he was going to start asking a lot more questions. Sarah didn't go back to her barracks. She walked to the base gym instead, changed into PT gear in the empty women's locker room, wrapped her hands with the methodical precision of someone who had done it 1,000 times, and started hitting the heavy bag. Left jab, Right cross, left hook, right uppercut. Each strike precise, controlled, delivered with a technical perfection that would have made a professional boxing trainer weep. The bag swung on its chains and Sarah reset, and she hit it again and again and again. She had learned to box from her father when she was 8 years old. Master Chief William Calloway, SEAL Team 5. Call sign Phantom. The man they called the Ghost of Fallujah, after he extracted 17 hostages from a compound surrounded by 200 insurgents using nothing but 6 operators, 4 suppressed rifles, and a level of tactical audacity that bordered on insanity. He believed that every child should know how to defend themselves. He believed it the way other fathers believed their children should know how to ride a bike or throw a baseball. It was non-negotiable. It was fundamental. It was the foundation upon which everything else was built. He taught Sarah stance and footwork in their backyard in San Diego, the grass worn down to dirt in a rectangle roughly the size of a boxing ring. Her mother Karen, watching from the kitchen window with an expression that alternated between pride and terror, because she loved the man who was teaching her daughter to fight, and she feared the world that made such teaching necessary. Anger makes you stupid, William Calloway had told his daughter. His voice calm, patient, the voice of a man who had killed more people than he could count, and understood with perfect clarity the cost of every single one. Stupid gets you killed. You want to survive, think. Always think. He taught her to slip punches and counterstrike. Taught her that fighting wasn't about anger, wasn't about proving anything, wasn't about winning or losing. It was about calculation. Pure, cold mathematical calculation. He died calculating. A compound in northern Syria, October 2019. His team had been ambushed during an extraction. 6 operators caught in a kill zone with no cover and no exit. William Calloway had stayed behind. Positioned himself at a choke point between 2 mud brick walls. Laid down suppressive fire that forced the enemy to rout around him, buying his team the 90 seconds they needed to reach the extraction point. He took a bullet through the throat 14 seconds before the last man cleared the kill zone. Bled out in the Syrian dirt, while his teammates escaped with a high-value target who would provide intelligence that saved an estimated 300 lives over the following 18 months. The math worked. 6 operators and an intelligence asset weighed against 1 man's life. William Calloway would have approved of the equation. He was always good at math. Sarah had been 17, a junior in high school, brown hair in a ponytail, a chemistry textbook in her backpack, plans to study nursing at San Diego State, a life that made sense, that followed a trajectory she could predict that existed in a world where fathers came home from deployments and swung their daughters around in airport terminals while mothers cried and dogs barked, and everything was exactly the way it was supposed to be. The chaplain arrived at their house in San Diego on a Tuesday morning. Sarah was eating cereal. Lucky Charms. She would never eat Lucky Charms again. Ma'am, on behalf of a grateful nation and the United States Navy, Karen Calloway made a sound that Sarah had never heard before and hoped never to hear again. The sound of a woman whose worst fear had just been confirmed. The sound of a heart breaking in a way that could never be fully repaired. The day after his funeral, Sarah had walked into a Navy recruiting office on Rosecrans Street, still wearing her black dress, still carrying the folded flag they had handed her mother at Arlington because Karen hadn't been able to hold it. Hadn't been able to hold anything, had barely been able to stand. "I want to be a SEAL," Sarah had said. The recruiter, a first-class petty officer with a desktop covered in pamphlets and a face that suggested he had heard every possible request from every possible person, had laughed. Not unkindly. The way you laugh at a child who says they want to fly. "Ma'am, there's no such thing as a female SEAL." Then I'll be the first. She wasn't the first, but she was among the first. The Navy's gender integration program had begun accepting female candidates in 2021, 2 years after her father's death. Sarah had been selected for BUD/S Class 351 in 2022. She reported to Coronado in January 2023 with 16 other women and 206 men. All of them about to enter the most demanding military training program in the world. 6 months later, 4 women remained, then 3, then 2. Then on the morning of the final evolution one, Sarah Calloway. She hadn't quit when they held her underwater until her lungs screamed and her vision narrowed to a tunnel of gray light. She hadn't quit when they made her run until the skin on her feet peeled away and every step left bloody prints on the sand. She hadn't quit during surf torture when instructors stood over her in the freezing Pacific surf, telling her she didn't belong, telling her to ring the bell, telling her that women weren't built for this. She had thought about quitting. Once. At hour 43 of Hell Week, lying face down in the sand, hypothermic, hallucinating her body, consuming itself for fuel because there was nothing left to burn. She had thought about the bell, how easy it would be. 3 steps, 1 pull, and the pain would stop. Then she heard her father's voice. Not a hallucination, not a memory, something deeper, something wired into the architecture of who she was. Think, always think. She thought. She calculated. She assessed the situation with the same cold precision her father had taught her on that worn patch of grass in San Diego. The pain is temporary. Quitting is permanent. The bell is 3 steps away, and it will be 3 steps away tomorrow and the day after that. It's not going anywhere. But this moment is. This moment will pass. And when it does, you'll either be on the other side of it, or you'll be standing next to a bell wondering what would have happened if you'd held on for 1 more minute. She held on. She finished BUD/S, earned her trident, got assigned to SEAL Team 4 out of Virginia Beach, deployed to 3 countries in her first year, earned a reputation as a quiet, precise, devastatingly effective operator who never wasted a word, a bullet, or a movement. And then Somalia happened. Left jab, right cross, left hook. The heavy bag swung wildly. Sarah's knuckles were raw, the wraps spotted with blood that had soaked through. Her arms burned with lactic acid. Sweat dripped from her chin and darkened the concrete floor. But she kept hitting because if she stopped hitting the bag, she might start thinking about the basement. And if she started thinking about the basement, she would hear Danny Hargrove's voice again. And if she heard Danny's voice, she would feel his blood on her hands, warm at first, and then cooling the way life always cools when it leaves a body. Mogadishu. 8 months ago. The mission was supposed to be clean. 4 operators inserting by helicopter under cover of darkness. Target a 3-story residential compound in the Hodan district, where al-Shabaab fighters were holding 12 American aid workers who had been kidnapped from a medical convoy 6 days earlier. Intelligence said 30 to 40 hostiles. The reality was 60. Intelligence said light weapons rifles and pistols. The reality included RPGs, crew-served machine guns, and a network of tunnels connecting the compound to adjacent buildings that allowed fighters to appear and disappear like ghosts. Sarah's team went in anyway. 4 operators against 60. The math didn't work. Everyone knew the math didn't work. They went in anyway because 12 Americans were going to die if they didn't, and because that was the job, and because sometimes the job required you to walk into a room knowing the math was against you and trust that your training, your teammates, and something beyond calculation would carry you through. Ryan Foley took a round through the chest covering their entry into the compound. The bullet punched through his plate carrier at the seam between the front and side panels, a 1 in 1,000 shot that found the only gap in his armor. He went down in the doorway, still firing, still calling out target positions, still doing his job even as his lungs filled with blood. Danny Hargrove caught shrapnel from an RPG that detonated against the wall behind him. The blast peppered his legs, his torso, his arms with fragments of hot metal that tore through flesh and muscle and lodged against bone. He kept fighting, cleared 2 rooms with Sarah before his legs gave out and he collapsed against a concrete wall, leaving a red smear as he slid to the floor. They got the hostages out. All 12. Sarah and the 4th operator, a veteran chief named Brennan, fought through 3 floors of the compound while Danny bled in the basement and Ryan died in the doorway, and 60 men with rifles tried to kill them. Sarah killed 11 men that night. 11 human beings who had families and histories and names she would never know. 11 trigger pulls, each one preceded by a calculation so fast it barely registered as thought. Threat, distance, angle, fire, move, threat, distance, angle, fire, move. And somewhere in the middle of it, somewhere between the 7th kill and the 8th, something happened inside her that she had never told anyone except Danny Hargrove in the minutes before he died. She stopped being afraid. Not the way soldiers stop being afraid when adrenaline overrides their nervous system. Not the way trained operators stop being afraid through repetition and conditioning. She stopped being afraid the way a wolf stops being afraid in a room full of sheep. She became the most dangerous thing in that compound, and for approximately 30 seconds, she felt it. Felt the power. Felt the certainty. Felt the intoxicating, terrifying euphoria of absolute dominance. For 30 seconds, she understood why some operators lost their humanity. Why some men came back from war with the hunger that civilian life could never satisfy. For 30 seconds, she was not Sarah Calloway, daughter of William, student of discipline and restraint. She was something older, something primal, something that lived in the darkest part of the human experience and smiled. Then Danny Hargrove's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Ghost, I'm hit bad. Need you in the basement." And the 30 seconds ended, and she was human again, and she ran to her teammate with the taste of something terrible still on her tongue. She held Danny for 40 minutes in that basement. 40 minutes while Chief Brennan secured the hostages and called for extraction. 40 minutes while gunfire rattled the floors above them, and the walls shook with explosions, and the air grew thick with dust, and the copper smell of blood. Danny was 26 years old. From Savannah, Georgia. He had a wife named Claire and a 2-year-old daughter named Lily, who had just learned to say Dada on a video call 3 days before the mission. He had a laugh that could fill a room and a throwing arm that had almost earned him a baseball scholarship before he decided that serving his country mattered more than a curveball. He bled out in increments. Each minute a little less color in his face. Each breath a little more shallow. Each word a little harder to form. Sarah told him about her father, about the backyard in San Diego, about Lucky Charms and chemistry textbooks, and a girl who wanted to be a nurse before the world showed her what she really was. Danny listened, smiled, blood on his teeth. "Peace isn't the absence of fighting ghosts," he said. His voice barely a whisper, his eyes already looking at something she couldn't see. "Peace is knowing what you're fighting for." He died at 0347 local time. Sarah was holding his hand. She didn't let go for 11 minutes after his heart stopped. Chief Brennan had to physically pull her away when the extraction helicopter landed. She carried Danny's dog tags and Ryan Foley's dog tags out of Mogadishu on the same chain as her trident. She had carried them every day since. 8 months, 243 days, 5,832 hours. She had counted every one. The heavy bag swung on its chains. Sarah's hands were bleeding through the wraps now. Her shoulders screamed. Her lungs burned. "You're going to break your hands." The voice came from behind her. Female, commanding, the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Sarah caught the bag and turned. Colonel Patricia Dawson stood in the gym doorway. 56 years old, the base commander and the first woman to hold that position at Fort Braxton. Silver eagles gleamed on her collar with the quiet authority of rank earned over 34 years of service. Her gray hair was pulled back in a regulation bun. Her eyes were the color of gunmetal and carried the same cold precision. "Ma'am." Sarah came to attention. "At ease, petty officer." Dawson walked closer, studied Sarah's raw knuckles with the clinical assessment of someone who had seen plenty of blood and understood the difference between injury and self-destruction. "I heard what happened in the mess hall. It was nothing, ma'am. An Army staff sergeant assaulted a Navy petty officer in front of 146 witnesses. That is not nothing. I don't want to make a formal complaint, ma'am." "I know you don't." Dawson's voice softened, but only slightly the way steel softens when you heat it from rigid to merely hard. "I also know why you don't." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "I read your file this morning, Petty Officer Calloway. Your real file. The one that required 2 phone calls and a direct authorization from the Chief of Naval Operations Office." Dawson let that settle. "Impressive record." Sarah said nothing. "Somalia. The hostage extraction. Your team pulled 12 Americans out of an Al-Shabaab compound against 60-4 odds. Still nothing. 2 of your teammates didn't make it out. Chief Petty Officer Ryan Foley. Petty Officer First Class Danny Hargrove. Call sign Ghost." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Foley took a round covering your entry. Hargrove bled out from shrapnel wounds before medevac could reach him." Dawson's voice was almost gentle now. "You held Hargrove's hand while he died. Told him about your father. Promised him you'd stop." Sarah's voice cracked like ice breaking on a river. "Ma'am, please stop." Dawson stopped. The gym was silent except for the creak of the heavy bag still swinging on its chains, pendulum slow, and the sound of Sarah Calloway's breathing, which was no longer steady. "Why are you here?" Petty Officer Dawson asked quietly. "You could be anywhere, training with your team, running operations, doing the work you were trained for, the work your father gave his life preparing you for. Instead, you requested transfer to intelligence support at an Army base in California. You took a desk job. You've spent 3 weeks pretending to be a paper pusher while Army sergeants treat you like a punching bag." Dawson stepped closer. Why Sarah's jaw worked. The tendons in her neck stood out like cables. "I made a promise." "To who?" "To Foley and Hargrove. To your father." "To myself." She swallowed hard. "I promised that if I survived Somalia, I'd find another way. A way that didn't involve—" She stopped. The word hung in the air between them, unspoken but understood. "Killing people," Dawson said. Sarah didn't answer. Didn't need to. Dawson nodded slowly. The nod of a woman who had spent 34 years in uniform and understood the particular agony of being exceptionally good at something you wished didn't exist. "I understand more than you think," she said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "But I didn't come here to discuss your past. I came to discuss your future." She handed the paper to Sarah. "Joint Combat Readiness Assessment. 3-day field evaluation. Army and Navy personnel together. Physical endurance. Tactical problem solving. Leadership under stress. Results go in permanent service records." Dawson's eyes locked onto Sarah's. "I'm requiring Staff Sergeant Harmon's squad to participate. And I'm specifically requesting that you participate as well. Not as an evaluator, as a competitor." Sarah unfolded the paper. "Read it." Looked up. "Ma'am, with respect, if I compete in this assessment and perform to my actual capabilities, people will figure out that I'm not a desk sailor." Dawson's smile was thin and sharp as a blade. "Good. Maybe it's time they learned. I came here to disappear, ma'am. You came here to hide, petty officer. There's a difference." Dawson's voice hardened. "Hiding doesn't honor the men who died for you. Hiding doesn't honor your father. And hiding doesn't help the next generation of women who want to follow in your footsteps." Sarah flinched. A small movement barely visible, but Dawson saw it. "You have skills that 99% of military personnel will never possess. Skills earned through sacrifice and pain and the deaths of people you loved. You can waste those skills pushing papers and getting slapped by insecure sergeants. Or you can use them to show every person on this base what a real warrior looks like." Dawson turned toward the door. "Assessment starts Monday, 0600. I expect to see you there." She paused at the threshold. "And petty officer, your father would be proud. Not because you're a SEAL, because after everything you've been through, you're still standing." She was gone before Sarah could respond. That night, Sarah lay on her rack in the barracks, staring at water-stained ceiling tiles. The room was nearly empty. Most personnel were out for the evening doing whatever soldiers and sailors did on Thursday nights, when they weren't deployed and weren't dead and weren't lying in the dark running calculations they didn't want to run. If she participated in the assessment and performed to her actual capabilities, her cover would be destroyed. Questions would be asked. Her file would be pulled. People would know what she was. If she didn't participate, she'd be disobeying a direct order from a full bird colonel. And if she participated but deliberately underperformed, held back, pretended to struggle, let Jake Harmon win, she'd be betraying everything her father had taught her about honor. "Never lie about what you are," William Calloway had said. She could hear his voice as clearly as if he were standing beside her rack. "Even when it's easier, even when it hurts, you stand up and you show them who you are, or you die a coward." He had lived those words, died living them. Stayed behind at that choke point in Syria because lying about what he was pretending he wasn't the best man for the position would have been a betrayal of everything he believed. Sarah reached under her pillow and pulled out the chain she'd worn since Somalia. The trident hung heavy and cold against her palm. Beside it, 2 dog tags clinked together with the soft metallic whisper of the dead, speaking to the living. Foley Ryan D. Hargrove, Danny W. She'd carried them for 8 months. Every day. Every night. A reminder and a penance. A talisman and a chain. "I don't know what to do," she whispered to the darkness. I came here to stop, to be normal, to find peace. The darkness didn't answer, but somewhere in her memory, Danny Hargrove's voice did. Peace isn't the absence of fighting ghosts. Peace is knowing what you're fighting for. Then the dream came. It was always the same. The compound in Mogadishu, the hallway on the second floor, the door she kicked open, the two men inside turning toward her with rifles half raised. She put them down with 2 shots each center mass the way she'd been trained, the way her body performed when her conscious mind stepped aside and let the machinery do its work. But in the dream, after the men fell, she didn't move to the next room. She stood over them, and she looked down at what she had done, and she smiled. That was the part that woke her up. Not the killing. The smile. The knowledge that somewhere inside her, buried beneath the training and the discipline and the promise she'd made to a dying friend there, existed something that enjoyed this. Something that felt alive only when it was taking life. Something her father had warned her about in the only conversation they'd ever had about the darkness that lived inside operators. You'll feel it someday, William had told her. She was 15, sitting on the back porch in San Diego while the sun set over the Pacific and painted the sky in colors that seemed too beautiful for the conversation they were having. The feeling that you're invincible, that nothing can touch you, that you're more than human. He'd stared at the sunset with eyes that had seen things he would never describe. When you feel it, that's when you're in the most danger. Not from the enemy, from yourself. Because that feeling is a lie, and if you believe it, you'll become something you can't come back from. How do you stop it? Sarah had asked. You remember that every person you face is someone's son, someone's father, someone's Danny Hargrove with a daughter named Lily who just learned to say Dada. He'd looked at her then, really looked at her. You remember that taking a life is never free. There's always a cost. And if you ever reach a point where you can't feel that cost anymore, that's when you walk away. No matter what. You walk away. Sarah woke up at 03:47, the exact time Danny Hargrove had died. She woke up with sweat on her skin and tears on her face, and her hand gripping the trident so hard that the eagle's wing had cut into her palm. She sat in the darkness for a long time. Then she got up, splashed water on her face, and made a decision. Monday was coming. She would be there. And whatever happened next, she would not lie about what she was. Lisa Pemberton found Sarah in the chow hall Sunday morning. Lisa was 26, the only woman in Jake Harmon's squad. She had short blonde hair and intelligent blue eyes, and the bearing of someone who had spent 6 years in the Army, watching things she didn't like, and holding her tongue because speaking up meant painting a target on her back. Mind if I sit? Sarah looked up from her coffee. Free country. Lisa sat down across from her, glanced around to make sure no one was within earshot. Lowered her voice. I saw what happened Thursday, what Harmon did. What? Everyone saw what happened Thursday. I know. I also know you could have stopped him. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Barely. A fraction of a degree. But Lisa caught it. What makes you think that? The way you moved when you stood up. The way you looked at him. I've been in the Army 6 years. I've seen soldiers. I've seen fighters. Lisa leaned forward across the table. You're something else entirely. Sarah said nothing, lifted her coffee, drank. I'm not here to expose you, Lisa continued. I'm here to warn you. Harmon is obsessed. He's been talking about the assessment all weekend, planning something, planning what I don't know exactly, but he's got Nolan convinced you're some kind of threat to his reputation. And when Harmon feels threatened, he gets dangerous. Not playful dangerous, not barracks brawl dangerous, the real kind, the kind that leaves marks. Sarah set her coffee down. I appreciate the warning. That's it. That's all you have to say. What do you want me to say? Lisa stared at her across the table. 2 women in a military chow hall on a Sunday morning surrounded by the smell of powdered eggs and burned toast, and the particular brand of institutional coffee that tasted like it had been brewed in a radiator. I want you to tell me I'm not crazy, that I'm not imagining things, that you really are something more than what you pretend to be. Sarah met her gaze, held it. Let 3 seconds pass. Corporal Pemberton, in my experience, the most dangerous thing a person can do is assume they know what someone else is capable of. She stood, picked up her tray. Jake Harmon is about to learn that lesson the hard way. She walked out of the chow hall. Behind her, Lisa Pemberton sat very still, staring at the door with a mixture of confusion and something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Monday morning. 05:45. The California sun was still below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and amber that would have been beautiful if anyone had been in the mood to notice. Sarah arrived at the assembly point 15 minutes early, the way she arrived everywhere, 15 minutes early, because punctuality was a form of respect and tardiness was a form of arrogance, and her father had drilled both of those lessons into her before she was old enough to understand the words. 32 participants had gathered near the motor pool, Army and Navy, officers and enlisted, men and women, all of them about to spend the next 72 hours being pushed to their physical, mental, and emotional limits by an evaluation designed to separate the capable from the pretenders. Master Gunnery Sergeant Victor Reyes stood at the front, clipboard in hand. He was 52 years old, built like a fire hydrant, had the weathered face of a man who had seen everything the military had to offer and was impressed by none of it. "Listen up," Reyes shouted. His voice carried the particular authority of a senior NCO who had spent 3 decades perfecting the art of making people feel simultaneously motivated and terrified. For the next 3 days, you will be evaluated on physical endurance, tactical proficiency, and leadership under stress. Your performance will be recorded in your permanent service records. Your failures will be documented. Your excuses will be ignored. He scanned the crowd with eyes that missed nothing. You will be divided into 8 squads of 4. Squad assignments are posted on the board behind me. Find your squad. Meet your squad mates. Be ready to move in 15 minutes. Sarah walked to the board, found her name. Squad 7, Callaway S, PO1USN, Harmon J, SSGUSA Nolan D, CPLUSA Pemberton L, CPLUSA. She stared at the list for a long moment. Someone had made sure she would be on Jake Harmon's squad. Someone with silver eagles on her collar and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Colonel Dawson wanted to see what would happen when the hunter became the hunted. Well, well, well. Jake's voice came from behind her, the voice of a man who still believed he was the most dangerous thing in any room he entered. Look who showed up. Sarah turned to face him. Nolan flanked his left. Lisa stood slightly apart, her expression carefully neutral. Harmon. That's Staff Sergeant Harmon to you, Squid. Staff Sergeant Harmon. Better. Jake stepped closer. Close enough that she could smell his aftershave. Something aggressive and overly applied, the olfactory equivalent of his personality. I was hoping you'd come. I've been looking forward to this. I'm sure you have. 3 days. Nowhere to hide. No desks to sit behind. No coffee to make. He smiled with teeth that had never been knocked loose. Just you and me and the chance to prove what I've been saying all along. And what's that? That you don't belong here. That you've never belonged here. That when it really counts, when things get hard and the pressure builds, and there's nowhere to run, you'll quit. Just like every other Navy princess who thinks she can play in the big leagues. Sarah looked at him. Really looked at him. And for just a moment, no longer than a heartbeat, she let the mask slip. Let him see what was behind her eyes. Not all of it. Just enough. A flash of the thing she kept locked away, the thing that had killed 11 men in a Mogadishu compound, and smiled while doing it. Jake's smile faltered. Just for a second. Just long enough. I guess we'll find out, Sarah said softly. Won't we, Staff Sergeant? She walked past him toward the assembly area. Behind her, she heard Nolan laugh nervously. What was that about? Jake didn't answer. Because for the first time since he had begun his campaign against Sarah Callaway, for the first time in his 8 years of military service, for the first time in his entire 28 years of life, Jake Harmon felt something he had never expected to feel while looking at a woman who weighed 115 pounds. Doubt. The first evolution began at 0600. A 15-mile ruck march through the mountainous terrain east of Fort Braxton. 60-pound packs, full combat gear, boots that would blister feet by mile 3 and destroy them by mile 10. Temperature already climbing toward 90 degrees, the California sun rising like a punishment over ridgelines that shimmered with heat. Move out, Reyes shouted. 32 soldiers started marching. Sarah settled into a rhythm she had learned during BUD/S. A rhythm that had nothing to do with speed and everything to do with sustainability. Steady pace. Controlled breathing. Ignore the weight on your shoulders. Ignore the heat pressing down on you like a hand. Ignore the voice in your head that starts counting miles and calculating suffering. Focus on the next step. And the next. And the next. This was the difference between athletes and operators. Athletes trained to peak. Operators trained to endure. An athlete could beat you in a sprint. An operator would still be moving 12 hours after the athlete collapsed. By mile 3, the field had started to separate. The front runners pushed ahead on adrenaline and ego-burning fuel they would need later. The stragglers fell back already defeated by the math of what lay ahead. And somewhere in the middle, Jake Harmon was starting to realize that his 235 pounds of gym muscle had become 235 pounds of liability. He wasn't out of shape, far from it. He could bench press 315 pounds, could deadlift 400, could do pull-ups until most men's arms gave out. But there was a difference between gym strength and operational endurance, between lifting weight and carrying it for hours through terrain that fought you with every step, between muscles built for show and muscles built for survival. Sarah knew the difference. She had lived the difference. She had carried 60-pound packs through African heat that made California feel like a spring morning through terrain that didn't have trails or roads or anything resembling flat ground, while men with rifles tried to kill her. By mile 7, she was in the lead group. Jake was 50 yards behind, breathing hard, his face the color of a brick sweat, pouring off him in sheets. "Slow down." Nolan gasped beside him. "You're burning out too fast." "Shut up." Jake pushed harder, closed the gap, pulled even with Sarah through sheer force of will and the particular stubbornness of a man who would rather destroy his body than admit a woman was outperforming him. "Think you're fast, squid." Sarah didn't respond. Just kept marching, steady, relentless. Her breathing, even her stride, unchanged. Her pack, riding her hips the way it was supposed to when you knew how to adjust the straps and distribute the weight and let your skeleton carry the load instead of your muscles. "I'm talking to you. Save your breath. You're going to need it." Mile 10. Jake was in trouble. His pack felt like it had doubled in weight. His knees ached. His lower back had seized into a knot of fire. His lungs couldn't pull enough oxygen from the hot, dry air. And somehow, impossibly infuriatingly, the small Navy woman beside him wasn't even breathing hard. Wasn't sweating excessively. Wasn't showing any sign that she was carrying the same weight through the same heat over the same terrain. "How?" He gasped. The word came out ragged, stripped of everything except genuine bewilderment. Sarah glanced at him. What? How are you not dying right now?" "Training. I train every day." "No." Sarah's voice was flat matter-of-fact, carrying no contempt and no satisfaction. "You lift weights every day. That's not the same thing." "What's the difference? You train for looks." "I train for survival." She pulled ahead, left him behind. And for the first time in his military career, Jake Harmon understood with perfect clarity that he had made a serious miscalculation about Sarah Calloway. He just didn't understand how serious. Mile 15. Sarah crossed the finish line first. Time 2 hours and 43 minutes. She was breathing slightly elevated but controlled, a light sheen of sweat on her face. She looked like she could have turned around and done the whole thing again without stopping. Jake crossed 23 minutes later. He collapsed on the ground, chest, heaving, legs cramping every muscle in his body, staging a revolt against the man who had abused them. Nolan finished 4 minutes after that, looking like he had been dragged behind a truck. Lisa Pemberton came in 11 minutes ahead of Jake. Her face sunburned and determined, her eyes finding Sarah across the finish area with an expression that said, "I'm watching and I'm learning." Impressive Calloway. Frank Owens appeared beside Sarah, a water bottle in his outstretched hand. He had not been part of the assessment. He had simply shown up at the finish line, the way old soldiers showed up at things that interested them with the quiet inevitability of gravity. Sarah took the water. "Master Sergeant, I've been watching you. The way you move, the way you pace yourself. That's not something they teach in basic intelligence training. I had a good instructor." "Who?" "My father. Military Navy." What rate? Sarah was quiet for a moment. The question was a door. Opening it meant letting someone else into the room where she kept her secrets. But Owens had kind eyes, careful eyes. The eyes of a man who had earned the right to ask questions by surviving the answers to his own. Special Warfare Operator. Senior Chief. SEAL Team 5. Owens went very still. The kind of still that only veterans achieve, the stillness of a man whose body has learned to freeze when his mind detects something significant. William Calloway. You knew him, I knew of him. Everyone in JSOC knew of him. The Phantom of Fallujah. 17 hostages. 200 insurgents. 6 operators. Owens shook his head slowly. He was a legend. He was my father. Owens looked at her. Really looked at her. The way you look at a painting when you suddenly realize it's not a copy, but an original. Then what the hell are you doing pushing papers at an army base? Sarah didn't answer. She finished her water, crushed the bottle, and walked away. But she felt Owens's eyes on her back, and she knew with the certainty of someone who had spent years reading people in rooms where misreading them meant death that he was not going to stop asking questions. That evening around the campfire, the day's rankings were announced by Reyes with the ceremonial gravity of a man reading a death warrant. Sarah Calloway, 1st place overall. Jake Harmon, 17th. The humiliation was total, complete. The kind that doesn't just bruise ego, but restructures it, forces it into configurations it was never designed to hold. And Jake's face, lit by the flickering orange light of the fire, showed something more than embarrassment. It showed rage, pure, unfiltered. The rage of a man watching the foundations of his identity crack beneath him. Sarah saw it, cataloged it, filed it away in the part of her brain that tracked threats the way a radar tracks inbound missiles. Tomorrow was day 2. Whatever Jake was planning, it was building towards something. She could feel it the way you feel a storm approaching, a change in pressure, a heaviness in the air, the particular silence that precedes violence. The fire had died to embers when she felt it, a presence moving through the darkness toward her gear. Footsteps soft, careful, placed with the deliberate precision of someone trying not to be heard. The rustle of canvas as someone opened her pack. Sarah counted to 5. Then she spoke without opening her eyes. Find what you're looking for. The footsteps froze. I know you're there, Harmon. I've known since you left the fire. Silence. Then Jake stepped out of the shadows, his face twisted into something between embarrassment and defiance. The face of a man caught doing something he knew was wrong, but wasn't ready to admit it. How you breathe, too loud. And your aftershave carries 20 feet downwind. Jake stared at her. The firelight had faded to a dull glow that turned everything the color of dried blood. You were going through my gear, looking for something, evidence of who I really am. Something you could use against me. I don't know what you're talking about. Sarah sat up slowly. The titanium chain glinted briefly at her throat before she tucked it back beneath her shirt. The gesture was automatic, protective, the way a mother tucks a blanket around a sleeping child. Let me save you some time. You won't find anything in my pack. Everything that matters, I keep on me, always. What's that supposed to mean? It means, go back to sleep. Staff Sergeant, tomorrow's going to be a long day, and you're going to need every advantage you can get. Jake's hands clenched into fists at his sides. You think you're better than me. I think you're afraid of me, and that fear is making you stupid. Sarah's voice dropped to something quiet, almost gentle, the way you speak to someone standing on a ledge. Stupid gets people killed. That's not a threat, it's advice. Take it or leave it. She lay back down and closed her eyes. After a long moment, Jake retreated into the darkness. Sarah listened to his footsteps fade. Then she opened her eyes and stared at the stars, and did not sleep because she knew with absolute certainty what was coming, and the only question left was whether she could stop it without becoming the thing she had promised Danny Hargrove she would never become again. Day 2 began at 0500 with a combat medical scenario that separated the thinkers from the reactors. Reyes had set up a simulated mass casualty event across a 2-acre field. Mannequins with realistic wounds scattered in patterns designed to overwhelm. Fake blood pooling in the dirt. Speakers hidden in the brush broadcasting screams and explosions, and the chaos of a world falling apart. Smoke grenades pumping gray haze across the terrain. You have 15 minutes, Reyes shouted. Triage, treat, and evacuate as many casualties as possible. Clock starts now. 32 soldiers scattered. Most of them sprinted toward the nearest mannequin and started working on whatever wound was in front of them. No assessment, no prioritization, no strategy, just adrenaline and instinct, and the desperate need to do something, anything, without first determining what that something should be. Sarah didn't move. She stood still for exactly 7 seconds, scanning the field, counting casualties, categorizing by wound severity, by survivability, by the cold mathematics of triage that determined who lived and who died, based not on who deserved saving, but on who could be saved. Then she started calling out orders with a voice that cut through the smoke and the screaming speakers and the chaos like a surgical instrument. Nolan, green tag on your left. Walking wounded. Move him to the collection point and get back here. Pemberton, red tag, 12 o'clock. Arterial bleed. Tourniquet above the wound, not on it. Go. Harmon, black tag in front of you. He's dead. Stop wasting time and move to the chest wound behind you. Jake's head snapped up from the mannequin he'd been working on. Who the hell put you in charge? Do you want to save lives, or do you want to argue? Jake hesitated. Around them, other squads were descending into chaos. People shouting over each other, nobody coordinating. Casualties being treated in the wrong order by people who hadn't been trained to make the kind of decisions that Sarah was making instinctively. Lisa had already applied her tourniquet and was moving to the next casualty. Nolan was jogging back from the collection point. Harmon. Sarah's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Chest wound. Now, or he dies. Jake moved. He didn't know why he moved. Didn't know why he was following orders from a woman he had slapped across the back of the head 4 days ago. But something in her voice bypassed his ego and spoke directly to the part of him that had joined the military because he wanted to save lives, the part buried beneath years of posturing and insecurity, and the desperate need to be the biggest, strongest, most dominant person in every room. He moved because she was right, and somewhere beneath the rage and the humiliation, he knew it. For the next 14 minutes, Squad 7 operated like a single organism. Sarah called the shots, directed traffic, made split-second triage decisions that seemed to emerge not from training manuals, but from somewhere beyond normal military education, from a place where the difference between theory and practice was measured in body bags. When Reyes called time, Squad 7 had triaged and treated more casualties than any other squad by a margin of 40%. How the hell did you do that? Lisa asked as they walked back toward base camp. Her voice carried the particular breathlessness of someone who had just witnessed something they couldn't fully process. Do what you didn't even hesitate. You just knew. Which ones to save? Which ones to let go? How to coordinate everything? Where did you learn that? Sarah stopped walking, turned to face Lisa with eyes that had gone somewhere far away. Corporal, in my experience, the difference between life and death usually comes down to about 3 seconds. How you spend those 3 seconds determines everything. You can panic, you can freeze, you can run around trying to help everyone and end up helping no one. She paused. Or you can think, assess, prioritize, and accept that you can't save everyone. But you can save someone. Where did you learn that? A basement in Mogadishu. 18 hours, 3 wounded teammates, 1 medical kit, and 100 hostiles between us and extraction. She started walking again before Lisa could respond. But the words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that refused to go out. The afternoon brought tactical problem solving. 8 squads, 8 different scenarios, each designed to test leadership adaptability and combat decision-making under pressure. Squad 7 drew Scenario 4, hostage rescue simulation. The setup was complex. 3 hostages held in a fortified building. Unknown number of hostiles. Multiple entry points. Limited time. Evaluated by Reyes himself, who stood at a distance with his clipboard and his unreadable expression and his 30 years of experience in knowing exactly what right looked like. Jake immediately took charge. All right, here's the plan. Nolan, you take the front door. Pemberton, you cover the rear exit. I'll go through the window and neutralize any threats. Calloway, you stay outside and call for backup if things go sideways. Sarah raised an eyebrow. One eyebrow. A movement so slight it barely qualified as an expression, but it communicated everything. That's your plan. You got a problem with it. Several. Then keep them to yourself. I'm the senior enlisted here. I'm in charge. You're about to get your entire squad killed. The words landed like a slap, which was appropriate given their history. Jake's face went red. His neck swelled. The veins in his temples became visible. What did you say? Your plan has no overwatch, no coordinated entry, no contingency for multiple hostiles. You're sending people through fatal funnels without suppressive fire, and you're putting your least experienced operator on the primary breach point. Nolan can handle it. Nolan has never breached a door under fire in his life. Have you? Nolan looked uncomfortable. The particular discomfort of a man being asked a question whose honest answer would embarrass him in front of his squad leader. I mean, in training. Training isn't real. In training, nobody shoots back. Sarah turned to Jake. How many building clearances have you done? Real ones. Not simulations, not exercises. Real operations where the people inside were trying to kill you. Jake's jaw tightened. That's classified. It's 0. I can tell by the way you're positioning people. You've read about this in manuals. You've watched videos. You've probably memorized the Army Field Manual on urban operations word for word. But you've never done it. And you have Sarah held his gaze. 14 times. Different countries. Different situations. Same principles. The principles that keep people alive when everything goes wrong. The squad went silent. Even Reyes, who had been observing from a distance with the professional detachment of a surgeon watching an operation, stepped closer. 14. Lisa whispered. The number hung in the air. The number doesn't matter, Sarah said. What matters is that I know what works and what gets people killed. And your plan gets people killed. Jake stepped into her space, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body. Close enough that his shadow fell over her like a threat. You think you can do better? I know I can. Sarah looked past him at Reyes. Permission to present an alternate tactical approach. Master Gunnery Sergeant Reyes nodded slowly. Granted. Sarah turned to her squad. The transformation was instantaneous. Her posture shifted. Her voice changed. Not louder but denser, carrying a weight of authority that had nothing to do with rank and everything to do with competence. Nolan. You're on Overwatch. Find the highest point with a clear sight line to all exits. You see anyone who isn't us or a hostage, you call it out. Do not engage unless I give the order. Pemberton. You're with me on primary entry. We go in fast. We go in quiet. We clear room by room using standard 2-person tactics. You take left, I take right. Trust your training and trust me. Harmon. She paused. Let the moment build. Your rear security. Anyone tries to flank us or escape out the back, you stop them. Rear security. Jake's voice dripped with contempt. You're putting me in the back. I'm putting you where you'll do the most good. You're strong, you're aggressive, and you're not trained for precision close quarters work. Rear security plays to your strengths. This is tactics. You can argue with me, or you can help me bring everyone home alive. Your choice. Jake looked at Nolan. Nolan looked at Lisa. Lisa looked at Sarah. I'm in, Lisa said. No hesitation, no qualification. Nolan nodded. Me too. Jake stood alone, his authority crumbling, his squad choosing a stranger over him. The humiliation was absolute, but beneath it, beneath the rage and the wounded pride and the desperate need to reassert dominance, something else stirred. Something that recognized competence when it saw it, even when competence came in a package his ego refused to accept. Fine. He spat the word like something rotten. Do it your way. But when this goes wrong, it's on you. If this goes wrong, Sarah said, I'll be the first one through the door. Whatever happens to the squad happens to me first. That's the deal. That's always the deal. She turned toward the building. Move out. The simulation lasted 11 minutes. Sarah's plan worked flawlessly. She moved through the building like water flowing through a pipe fluid, and inevitable and impossible to stop. Lisa matched her stride for stride, clearing corners with a natural aptitude that surprised even herself. Nolan called out targets from his Overwatch position with crisp precision, and Jake, stationed at the rear, stopped two simulated hostiles from escaping through the back exit with the aggressive efficiency that was Sarah had to admit exactly what he was good at. 4 rooms cleared, 6 simulated hostiles neutralized, 3 hostages extracted, 0 friendly casualties. Reyes marked his clipboard with what might have been the beginning of a smile, though on his weathered face, it was hard to distinguish from indigestion. Squad 7, full marks, best performance of the day. Lisa couldn't stop grinning. Nolan looked at Sarah like he was seeing a new color for the first time. And Jake stood apart from the group, his face a mask of barely controlled fury that was beginning in its deepest layers to crack. That evening, Reyes read the standings around the campfire. Day 2 rankings. First place, Squad 7, Callaway commanding. Sarah watched Jake across the fire. He sat with his eyes fixed on the flames, his hands opening and closing in a slow, rhythmic pattern. He wasn't listening to the rankings. He was somewhere else. Somewhere dark and internal, where plans were formed and decisions were made, and the last restraints of civilized behavior were being quietly removed. Lisa slid onto the log beside Sarah. You were amazing today. I was efficient. There's a difference. No, you were amazing. The way you moved through that building, the way you called targets before anyone else even saw them. Lisa lowered her voice to a whisper. You've done this for real, haven't you? Not simulations. Real operations. Real hostages. Real bullets. Sarah didn't answer. I knew it, Lisa breathed. From the first day you walked onto this base. I knew there was something different about you. Sarah turned to look at her. Lisa, I need you to understand something. You say you want to be like me. You don't. Yes, I do. No. Sarah's voice carried something Lisa hadn't heard before. Not authority, not confidence. Pain. You don't want what I carry. The skills, yes. The training, yes. But not the weight. Not the cost. What cost Sarah was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called. I'm afraid of what I became in places like Somalia. In situations where the only way out was through and through meant killing everyone in my path. Her voice dropped to something barely audible. I'm afraid that part of me enjoyed it. The power, the control, the certainty that I was the most dangerous thing in the room. She looked at her hands, turned them over in the firelight. That's not something to aspire to, Lisa. That's something to survive. Before Lisa could respond, Jake's voice cut across the camp with the sharp edge of a man who had been sharpening his intentions all day. Assessment continues tomorrow at 0500. 24-hour patrol followed by individual combat evaluation. He was looking directly at Sarah. Hand to hand, full contact, no weight classes. Reyes frowned. Harmon, that's not standard. It's in the assessment parameters, Master Gunnery Sergeant. Section 7, Paragraph 3. Individual combat proficiency testing at the evaluator's discretion. Reyes checked his clipboard. His frown deepened into something that looked almost like concern. It is technically permitted. Then I'm invoking it. Jake stood. Tomorrow night, after the patrol evolution, anyone who wants to test themselves against anyone else. His eyes locked onto Sarah. Any volunteers? Sarah stood slowly. The fire cast her shadow long and dark across the dirt. I volunteer. Jake smiled. The smile of a man who believed he had finally cornered his prey in a space where there was no room to run and no room to hide, and no choice but to face him on his terms. Perfect. Sarah walked away from the fire. Lisa caught up to her. You can't do this. He's got 100 pounds on you. 6 inches of reach. He's been training Army combatives for years. I know. Then why? Because if I don't face him now on my terms, he'll keep coming. And eventually he'll catch me in a situation where restraint isn't an option. And if I lose restraint, Lisa... She stopped. In the darkness behind her eyes, the compound in Mogadishu flickered like a film reel. Hallways. Doorways. The crack of her rifle. Bodies falling. And the smile. The smile she could not forget. If I lose restraint, someone will get hurt in ways that can't be fixed. The patrol evolution started at 0500 and ran for 24 continuous hours. Security rotations. simulated attacks at random intervals, communication challenges, sleep deprivation designed to strip away every layer of pretense and reveal the raw architecture of a person's character. Sarah had done this before. She had done it for longer. She had done it with actual enemies probing her perimeter, and actual bullets snapping past her head, and the actual lives of 12 American hostages depending on her ability to remain functional when her body and mind were screaming for rest. So, while other soldiers cracked under the pressure, while tempers flared and judgment deteriorated, and the carefully maintained facades of competence began to crumble, Sarah remained steady, calm, operational, a fixed point in a rotating world. Jake began making mistakes at hour 12, small ones at first, a missed radio check, a security rotation that left a gap in coverage for 45 seconds. By hour 18, the mistakes had become catastrophic. His response to a simulated attack was slow and poorly coordinated. His communication with Nolan broke down entirely. His squad members stopped looking to him for guidance and started looking at Sarah, instead the way passengers on a sinking ship look at the person who seems to know where the lifeboats are. And then at hour 21, the thing Sarah had been dreading happened. A simulated IED detonation, a thunderclap of sound and a flash of light that split the darkness like a crack in the world. Standard training exercise. Harmless. Designed to test reaction time and composure. Sarah's body didn't get the message. The sound hit her nervous system like a key turning in a lock. And suddenly, she was not standing in a California forest at 3 in the morning. She was in a concrete hallway in Mogadishu, and the walls were shaking, and Ryan Foley was falling in the doorway with a hole in his chest, and Danny Hargrove was sliding down a wall leaving a red smear on the concrete, and she was killing men in the dark with a precision that felt like something other than human. She froze. 15 seconds of absolute stillness. Her eyes open, but seeing nothing in the present tense. Her hands locked at her sides. Her breathing stopped. Lisa found her. Calloway. Lisa's voice came from somewhere far away. Sarah. Sarah, look at me. Look at me right now. Lisa grabbed her shoulders, shook her. Not hard, just enough. Sarah's eyes refocused. She sucked in a breath like a drowning woman breaking the surface. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. Sweat had soaked through her shirt despite the cool night air. I'm fine, Sarah said. The words were automatic, meaningless, the first thing operators said when they were anything but fine. You're not fine. What just happened? Nothing. That wasn't nothing. You were gone. Completely gone. For 15 seconds, you weren't here. Sarah closed her eyes. Opened them. The forest was back. California. Fort Braxton. The patrol. Not Mogadishu. Not the compound. Not the hallway. It happens sometimes, she said quietly. When there's a loud sound. An explosion. My body goes back. Back where Sarah looked at Lisa in the darkness. Her mask was gone. Not by choice. Stripped away by 15 seconds of neurological betrayal. And without the mask, Lisa could see what was underneath. Not the warrior. Not the operator. Not the woman who had killed 11 men and walked away. Just a 22-year-old girl who was tired of carrying the dead. Somalia, Sarah whispered. I go back to Somalia. To the compound. To the hallway where I killed 11 men. And in the flashback, Lisa, I'm not horrified by what I did. I'm not traumatized. I'm smiling. She held up her trembling hands. That's what I'm afraid of. Not Jake Harmon. Not combat. Not dying. I'm afraid of the version of myself that smiled in that hallway. Because she's still in there. And every time something like this happens, she gets a little closer to the surface. Lisa took Sarah's hands, held them steady. The person you're describing, the one who smiles at killing, she wouldn't have frozen just now. She wouldn't feel guilt. She wouldn't be shaking. She wouldn't have spent 3 weeks letting a man half her skill level slap her around because she was afraid of what she might do if she fought back. Lisa squeezed her hands. That's not a monster, Sarah. That's someone who gives a damn. And giving a damn is the only thing that separates warriors from killers. Sarah looked at her for a long time. Then she nodded. Once. And put her mask back on because the patrol wasn't over and the combat evaluation was coming. And she could not afford to be anything less than what the next 12 hours required. But something had shifted. A crack in the wall she had built around herself. A crack that let light in where before there had been only darkness. Hour 23. Most participants were running on fumes and willpower. Sarah was tired but functional. Jake was a wreck. Bloodshot eyes, trembling hands, a voice that cracked when he gave orders that no one was following. And when Reyes announced that the hand-to-hand combat evaluation would begin in 1 hour, something in Jake's face changed, shifted, hardened into something ugly and desperate and final. The face of a man who had lost everything except the belief that he could win this one thing, this one contest, this one physical confrontation against a woman who weighed 115 pounds. The mat was 20 feet by 20 feet, set up near the camp center, evaluators at each corner. Every remaining participant forming a loose circle, exhausted but alert, sensing with the animal instinct of people who had spent 3 days in the field together that something significant was about to happen. Jake was already there, bouncing on his toes, arms thick with veins, eyes wild with sleeplessness and barely contained violence. Sarah approached slowly, rolling her shoulders, loosening her joints. She had removed her outer shirt, leaving the olive-green undershirt that clung to her frame. Match ends on tap out, knockout, or evaluator stoppage, Reyes announced. No eye gouges, no groin strikes, no strikes to the throat. He looked at both fighters. Questions, Jake grinned. Does she get a handicap for being a girl? Nervous laughter from somewhere in the crowd. Sarah didn't react. No handicaps, Reyes said flatly. Step to center. They met in the middle of the mat. Jake had 6 inches of reach and nearly 100 pounds of weight advantage. He looked down at Sarah the way a hawk looks at a field mouse. Last chance to tap out squid. No shame in admitting you're outmatched. Sarah looked up at him. Her eyes were calm, empty. The eyes of someone who had faced things that would break Jake Harmon like a dry twig and had walked away carrying the pieces. Begin, Reyes called. Jake lunged, fast for his size. His right hand came in hard, a haymaker, designed to end the fight with one punch, the kind of strike that worked in bar brawls against people who didn't know how to move. Sarah slipped left. His fist sailed past her ear by less than an inch. She didn't counter. She redirected his momentum with a touch so light it barely qualified as contact. And suddenly Jake was stumbling past her, off balance, exposed. She stepped back. Reset. Waited. Jake spun around. Came again. Smarter this time. A jab-cross combination followed by a level change for a takedown. Textbook Army combatives. Well-drilled. Technically sound. Sarah sprawled on the takedown. Her hips dropped low. Her hands pushed down on his shoulders. He couldn't complete the shot. She spun out of his grip and created distance. Still didn't counter. Fight back, Jake shouted. Stop running. I'm not running. Then hit me. Sarah tilted her head slightly. Why? The question broke something in Jake's programming. He expected resistance, aggression, a fight he could win through superior size. What he got was a woman who moved like water around stone and refused to engage on his terms. Because that's what this is, he said through gritted teeth, a fight. Or are you too scared? I'm not scared of you, Sergeant. Then prove it. Sarah's jaw tightened, an almost imperceptible movement. You don't want me to prove it? Yeah, I do. No. Her voice dropped to something cold and quiet, the temperature of deep water, the temperature of places where light doesn't reach. You really don't, Jake charged. Full speed, full commitment, arms wide for a body lock that would take her to the ground and let his weight do the work. The move of a man who had stopped thinking entirely. Sarah didn't run. She stepped into his charge. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Her hands found his wrist and elbow. She pivoted, dropped her center of gravity, used his momentum to execute a hip throw that sent 235 pounds of Army Sergeant through the air like a rag doll. Jake hit the mat with an impact that drove the air from his lungs. Before he could recover, Sarah was on him. Her legs wrapped around his torso, her arms snaked around his neck. A rear naked choke. Perfectly applied, perfectly controlled. The kind of technique that came not from training manuals, but from years of applying it against people who were genuinely trying to kill you. Tap, Sarah said quietly, her mouth close to his ear, her voice carrying no anger, no satisfaction, no triumph, just a calm statement of fact. It's over. Just tap. Go to hell. He kept fighting. His face went red, then purple. His movements became sluggish, uncoordinated, the desperate thrashing of a body running out of oxygen. Tap, Sarah repeated. I don't want to put you to sleep, but I will. His hand came up, slapped the mat twice. Sarah released immediately, rolled away, stood up in one fluid motion. Jake lay on the mat, gasping, staring at the sky with an expression that contained multitudes. Shock, humiliation, and beneath it all, buried deep, the first tremor of something that might have been understanding. Reyes marked his clipboard. Match. Submission. Time 47 seconds. Sarah walked to the edge of the mat, reached for her canteen. That was when Jake attacked. He came off the mat like something unhinged. No warning, no announcement. Just pure rage propelling 235 pounds of desperate, humiliated man toward the woman who had broken everything he believed about himself. Calloway Owens shouted from the crowd. She turned, a fraction too late. Jake's shoulder hit her in the midsection like a battering ram. The impact drove her backward off the mat onto hard-packed dirt. Her canteen went flying. Her body hit the ground with a sound that made the entire crowd flinch. Jake was on top of her instantly, pinning her with his weight, his hands going for her throat. Think you're better than me, he screamed. Think you can just... Sarah's training kicked in, not the restrained, controlled techniques she had used on the mat. Something older. Something forged in a concrete hallway in Mogadishu, where hesitation meant death. Her palm shot upward, catching Jake under the chin. His head snapped back. Her hips bucked violently, creating space. Her legs wrapped around his arm. She twisted. Jake screamed. She had him in an armbar, the kind that separated shoulders from sockets. Stop! Reyes shouted, running toward them. Both of you stop! Sarah didn't stop. Her body was operating on autopilot. Years of combat programming overriding conscious thought. She torqued harder. Jake screamed again, and then the chain snapped. The thin titanium chain she had worn since Somalia. The chain that held her trident and the dog tags of her fallen teammates. It broke under the violence of the struggle, and its contents spilled onto the dirt like secrets falling from a torn pocket. A Navy SEAL trident badge landed 3 inches from Jake Harmon's face. 2 dog tags landed beside it. The firelight caught the metal and made it glow. Time stopped. Jake stared at the trident. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Sarah released the armbar, rolled away, grabbed the chain, the badge, the dog tags, pressed them against her chest with both hands. Her hands were shaking, the first sign of vulnerability she had shown in 3 days, in 3 weeks, in 8 months since Somalia. Holy Mother of God, Nolan whispered from somewhere in the crowd. 146 people stood in silence, staring at the small woman in the olive green shirt, clutching a trident badge against her heart with trembling hands. Staring at the thing that explained everything, the marches and the medical scenarios and the building clearances and the 47-second submission, and the way she moved through the world like something that could not be stopped. Colonel Dawson pushed through the crowd. Her uniform disheveled, her hair escaping its regulation bun, summoned from wherever she had been watching. Well, she said quietly, looking at Sarah, at Jake on the ground, at the trident visible between Sarah's fingers. I suppose the secret's out. Sarah stood, slowly, the way someone stands when the weight they're carrying isn't physical. She looked at Jake. He was sitting in the dirt, cradling his arm, staring at her with an expression she had seen before in the eyes of enemies who realized too late what they were facing, and in the eyes of allies who discovered what she was capable of. She crouched down, eye level, close enough that only he could hear. I've been where you are, Sergeant. Not the same situation, but the same feeling. Desperate to prove yourself. Terrified that you're not enough. Building everything you are on being the strongest, the toughest, the most dangerous person in the room. She paused. And then you meet someone who shows you that everything you thought was wrong. And you have a choice. Get bitter. Or get better. The bitter ones never grow. The better ones become the warriors they always wanted to be. She extended her hand. Jake looked at it for a long time. His arm throbbed. His pride was rubble. His reputation was ash. But something was happening behind his eyes. Something that looked like the first light of morning after the longest night of a man's life. He took her hand. Sarah pulled him to his feet. I'm sorry, he said. The words scraped out of him like something dragged across gravel. For the mess hall. For all of it. I'm sorry. I know. I didn't understand. I didn't. You didn't know what you were looking at. Most people don't. How did you become that? The same way you became what you are. Training. Sacrifice. Pain. She looked at him with eyes that held no anger. The difference is, I learned that true strength isn't about dominating people weaker than you. It's about protecting them. Who taught you that? My father. And 2 men who died in my arms because I wasn't strong enough to save them. She turned and walked toward the edge of camp, toward the darkness, toward the silence she needed to process what had just happened. Behind her, 146 people watched her go, and not one of them would ever forget what they had witnessed on that mat, and in the dirt beside it, and in the moment, a trembling hand reached down to lift a fallen man. The video hit 15 million views before sunrise. Sarah learned this from Frank Owens, who appeared at the edge of camp with 2 cups of coffee and the expression of a man delivering news that was simultaneously wonderful and catastrophic. She had spent the night sitting against a tree at the perimeter, watching stars fade into the pale wash of California dawn, running calculations she didn't want to run about a future she could no longer control. Her phone had been buzzing since midnight. Messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Notifications from applications she had forgotten existed. Missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. She had turned it off at 0100 because the buzzing felt like insects crawling on her skin, and because turning off a phone was easier than turning off reality. But reality didn't have a power button. 15 million, Owens said. He sat down beside her and handed her a cup. As of 0600, trending #1 on Twitter, #3 on TikTok. Every major news network has picked it up. Sarah took the coffee. Didn't drink. They're calling you the ghost of Fort Braxton. Someone dug up your call sign. Of course they did. There's a hashtag. She is a SEAL. About 8 million uses and climbing. Wonderful. Owens was quiet for a moment. The coffee steamed between them in the cool morning air. There's something else. There's always something else. Comments. Millions of them. Owens paused, choosing his words with the care of a man who understood that what he was about to say carried weight. Mostly positive. Women saying you're an inspiration. Veterans saying you represent what the military should be. Parents saying they're going to show the video to their daughters as proof that they can be anything. Sarah opened her eyes. She had expected mockery, disbelief, the usual chorus of voices insisting that women didn't belong in combat, that the video was staged, that the whole thing was a propaganda exercise designed to weaken the military. She had not expected this. Positive, overwhelmingly. There are trolls. There are always trolls. People saying it's fake. People saying women don't belong, but they're getting buried. What about the Pentagon? They released a statement at 0400. Owens pulled out his phone, read from the screen. The Department of Defense is aware of the video circulating on social media and is working to verify its authenticity. We have no further comment at this time. That's not a denial. No, it is not. Sarah took a sip of coffee. It was cold. She drank it anyway because cold coffee was still coffee, and because she had consumed worse things in worse places, and because the caffeine was the only thing standing between her and the emotional collapse that had been building since a titanium chain snapped on a combat mat 12 hours ago. The Admiral's helicopter lands in 2 hours, Owens said. Colonel Dawson wants you cleaned up and presentable. Presentable for what I don't know. But when a 3-star admiral flies across the country to meet with a petty officer, it's usually not for a casual conversation. Sarah stood, brushed dirt from her camouflage pants, looked at the tree she had been leaning against all night at the indent her back had left in the bark at the small piece of ground where she had spent her last hours as an anonymous woman with a desk job and a secret. That ground belonged to someone else now, someone who no longer existed. Calloway. She stopped. Owens had never used her last name without her rank before. The informality carried its own weight. Whatever happens next. Whatever the Admiral wants. Whatever the world decides you are. Don't forget what you showed us yesterday. Not the fighting, not the 47 seconds. The restraint, the choice. The hand you offered a man who spent 3 weeks trying to destroy you. He stood. That's what set you apart from every other operator I've served with in 32 years. The trident just means you passed a test. What you did on that mat means you passed the one that matters. He walked away before she could respond. Owens was good at that. At saying the thing that needed to be said and then leaving before the person he said it to could diminish it with modesty or deflect it with humor. It was a skill he had learned in 32 years of military service, and it was in its own way as precise as anything Sarah had ever done on a battlefield. She showered for the first time in 3 days, changed into a fresh uniform, pulled her long dark hair back into a regulation bun, looked at herself in the mirror above the sink. The same face stared back. The same brown eyes. The same 22-year-old features that could have belonged to a college senior, or a barista, or a nursing student at San Diego State. But the mask was gone. For 3 weeks, she had worn the face of a nobody, a paper pusher, a target. Now the world knew who she was, and the face in the mirror knew it too, and neither of them had any idea what came next. A knock at the barracks door. Calloway. "You decent," Lisa's voice. "Come in." Lisa entered. Her eyes were red in the way eyes get when sleep has been replaced by something more urgent. She sat on the edge of Sarah's bunk without asking the way people sit when formality has been burned away by shared experience. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know yet." "Fair enough." Lisa was quiet for a moment. "I talked to Nolan this morning, and he's shaken. Keeps saying he can't believe he spent 3 weeks helping Harmon harass a SEAL. Says he feels like the worst kind of fool. He shouldn't. He didn't know. That's what I told him." He also said something else. What Lisa looked at her. He said watching you fight changed something inside him. Made him realize that everything he thought made a person strong. Size, aggression, dominance was wrong. He said you moved like something he'd never seen before, and he wants to understand how someone learns to carry that kind of power without letting it carry them. Sarah felt something shift in her chest. A tectonic movement. Small but significant. Nolan said that. Nolan said that. And he's not the only one. Half the camp is talking about you. Not with fear. With respect. They should be careful around me. Why? Because of what I'm capable of. What I've done. Lisa shook her head. They're not afraid because they saw what you chose not to do. You had Harmon in that armbar. You could have torn his shoulder apart. Could have ended his career with one twist. You almost did. But you didn't. That's what they remember. Another knock. Colonel Dawson's voice clipped and urgent. "Calloway, the Admiral's helicopter just landed. Command post, now." Sarah took a breath. Stood. "Wish me luck." "You don't need luck," Lisa said. "You need to remember who you are. That's the problem." "I'm not sure I know anymore." The helicopter sat on the parade ground like a black insect resting on concrete. Naval Special Warfare Command markings on the fuselage. Rotors still turning, slowing the whine of the engine cycling down. A crowd had gathered at a respectful distance, soldiers and sailors drawn by the particular gravity that flag officers generate when they arrive unannounced at installations that rarely see stars on collars. Admiral Catherine Shaw stepped down from the helicopter with the quiet authority of a woman who had spent 40 years earning the right to be exactly where she was. She was 64 years old. Silver hair cut military short. Eyes that had seen carrier decks in storms and combat operations in 6 theaters, and the inside of briefing rooms where decisions were made that changed the shape of the world. She had been one of the first female Navy pilots, had commanded ships, had broken barriers with the methodical patience of water wearing through stone, and now she commanded every SEAL on the planet. Sarah came to attention. Admiral Shaw, Petty Officer First Class Sarah Calloway, reporting as ordered, ma'am. At ease, Calloway. Shaw studied her for a long moment. The kind of assessment that took inventory of everything visible and extrapolated everything that wasn't. Walk with me. They moved away from the crowd, away from the helicopter, away from the watching eyes that followed them like searchlights. "I watched the video," Shaw said. "Yes, ma'am. 47 seconds against a man with 100 pounds on you. Without breaking a sweat. He was angry, ma'am. Anger makes people sloppy. So does fear. But you weren't afraid. No, ma'am. Why not? Sarah considered the question. Because I've faced worse. Because I've survived worse. Because Jake Harmon, for all his size and aggression, was never going to kill me. He just wanted to hurt me. And I've been hurt by professionals. Shaw stopped walking, turned to face her directly. I'll be direct, Calloway. I need you. Not want. Need. Ma'am, the female integration program is at a critical juncture. We have 8 women who've passed BUD/S. 8 in the entire history of naval special warfare. And retention is a problem. Retention. 3 of them are considering leaving the community. The pressure is too much. The isolation. The feeling that they don't belong, that they're tokens, that every mistake they make reflects on every woman who'll ever try to follow them. Sarah nodded slowly. She understood that feeling the way she understood breathing. Not as an abstract concept, but as something that lived inside her every waking moment. What would you need me to do, ma'am? Run the Female Operator Development Program. Prepare candidates for selection. Mentor operators who've already earned their tridents. Build a support structure that doesn't exist yet, one that helps women succeed in a community that's still learning how to include them. Ma'am, I'm 22 years old. I don't have the rank or the experience to. You have 23 confirmed kills and a Navy Cross citation sitting in a classified file. You have a combat record that makes veteran operators twice your age shake their heads. And you have something no one else in the United States military has. Shaw stepped closer. You're the first woman to actually do this job. Not train for it. Not pass the selection. Do it. 4 combat deployments. Multiple successful operations. A hostage rescue against 60-4 odds. You've proven that women can operate at the highest levels of special warfare. Now I need you to prove that you can teach others to do the same. And if I fail, then you fail. And we learn from it, and we try again. Shaw's expression softened. Not much. A degree or 2. The way permafrost softens in brief Arctic summers. Sarah, I've been breaking barriers my entire career. You know what I've learned? The fear of failure is worse than failure itself. You can recover from failing. You can't recover from never trying. My father said something similar once. Your father was a remarkable man. I served with him briefly years ago when I was still flying, and he was running maritime interdiction operations off the coast of Yemen. He talked about you constantly, said you were going to change the world. Sarah felt tears threatening. Forced them back with the same discipline she used to force everything back. To compartmentalize, to function. He died before he could see me earn my trident. But I saw it. Shaw's voice carried something that sounded almost like tenderness, though on a 3-star admiral it manifested more as a temporary reduction in severity. I saw his daughter accomplish something he gave his life to make possible. And I'm asking you, not ordering, asking to help other daughters accomplish the same thing. Before Sarah could answer, a commotion erupted near the command post. Shouting, running footsteps, and a woman's voice cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk. A voice that Sarah hadn't heard in 18 months, but would recognize in a crowd of 10,000. Where is she? Where's my daughter? Sarah's blood went cold. Karen Calloway pushed through the assembled soldiers like they were made of paper. She was 54 years old. Graying hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Tired eyes that had driven through the night on California highways, fueled by adrenaline and maternal fury, and the particular terror of a mother who had watched her daughter choke a man unconscious on the internet. Sarah. She stopped 10 feet away. Mother and daughter stared at each other across a distance that was measured not in feet, but in months. 18 months of silence. 18 months of phone calls not made, and birthdays missed and holidays spent in separate states pretending that the absence of the other was a choice and not a wound. Mom, what are you doing here? What do you think I'm doing here? Karen's voice was high and tight, strung between anger and relief like a wire between 2 poles. I saw the video, 15 million views. My daughter has 15 million views, and I had to find out from a neighbor who called me at 3 in the morning asking why my child was fighting soldiers on the internet. Mom, don't mom me. Karen stepped closer. You told me you were doing intelligence work. Desk job, you said. Safe, you said. Nothing dangerous, you said. And then I watch a video of you choking a man twice your size unconscious in under a minute like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. You lied to me. The words hung in the air between them. Two words that contained 18 months of silence and 34 years of love, and the particular agony of a mother who had already buried a husband and couldn't bear the thought of burying a daughter. I didn't lie, Sarah said quietly. I just didn't tell you everything. That's the same thing. No, it isn't. You told me that if I became a SEAL, I was dead to you. You said you couldn't watch me throw my life away the way Dad did. So I stopped telling you things that would hurt you. I stopped calling because every time I heard your voice, I wanted to tell you everything, and I knew that everything would break you. Karen's face crumpled, the anger collapsing inward, revealing the grief and terror and love that had been hiding behind it. That's not fair. Neither was making me choose between my calling and my mother. They stood in silence. Two women who loved each other with a ferocity that frightened them both. Two women who had been broken by the same man's death and had spent the years since trying to protect each other from further damage while inflicting exactly that damage through the protection itself. Admiral Shaw cleared her throat. Perhaps this conversation would be better continued in private. Colonel Dawson is there. I'm not going anywhere, Karen said. Her voice had found its steel again, the steel of a military wife who had spent 20 years sending her husband into harm's way and had learned to stand her ground even when the ground was shaking. Not until my daughter tells me the truth. All of it. Everything she's been hiding. Everything she thought she was protecting me from. Sarah looked at Shaw, at Dawson, at the crowd of soldiers who were pretending very hard not to listen. Then she looked at her mother. Fine. You want the truth? Here it is. She took a breath, the deepest breath she had taken since Somalia. The kind of breath you take before you jump from a height you're not sure you'll survive. I'm a Navy SEAL, one of the first women to ever earn that title. I've deployed to combat zones on 4 continents. I've killed 23 people. I've watched teammates die in my arms. I've been wounded, shot at, and left for dead in places that don't appear on any map. Karen's face went the color of chalk. I came here because I was trying to escape. Because I promised a dying friend that I'd find another way. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of the people I'd killed. And because I missed you, Mom. Her voice cracked, the first crack in a wall that had been holding back an ocean. Every single day. I missed you every single day, but I couldn't call because you would have heard it in my voice. The things I'd done. The person I'd become. And I was afraid you'd hate that person as much as I hate her. Karen stood frozen. Processing. Computing. Running the kind of calculations that mothers run when the distance between who they thought their child was and who their child actually is becomes too vast to cross in a single step. Then she crossed it. 3 steps, and she had Sarah in her arms, holding her the way she had held her when she was small. When the world was a manageable size, and the worst thing that could happen was a scraped knee or a bad dream. I'm sorry, Karen whispered, her voice breaking on each word. Oh, God. Sarah, I'm so sorry. Mom, I pushed you away. I was so scared of losing you the way I lost Will that I tried to force you to be something you weren't. And instead of keeping you safe, I just made sure you faced everything alone. She pulled back, looked at her daughter's face with tears streaming down her own. I watched that video 100 times last night. 100 times I watched my daughter take down a man twice her size. And I realized I don't even know who you are anymore. My baby girl is a warrior, a real warrior. And I've been treating her like a child who made a bad decision. I am what Dad made me, Sarah said softly, what he trained me to be. I know you were afraid of that part of him, the part that was always ready. I didn't hate it, Karen said. I was afraid of it, afraid of where it would lead, afraid that if you became like Will, you'd end up like Will. I might still. I know. Karen's hands tightened on Sarah's arms. But I'd rather spend whatever time we have being your mother than spend the rest of my life regretting that I pushed you away. Sarah felt something break inside her, something that had been locked since the day Karen told her she was dead to her. Something that had calcified in the months of silence and the loneliness of barracks rooms and the particular isolation of being extraordinary in a world that wasn't sure it wanted you to be. She pulled her mother into a hug. Tight. Real. The first embrace they had shared in 18 months. I'm sorry, too, Sarah whispered. For not calling, for not trying harder, for choosing silence because it was easier than fighting for us. We're both stubborn. I get it from you. Your father always said I was the most stubborn woman he'd ever met. He told me the same thing about himself. They held each other for a long moment, while soldiers looked elsewhere, and the California sun climbed higher, and Admiral Shaw stood at a respectful distance, wearing an expression that suggested even three-star admirals could be moved by the sight of a mother and daughter finding their way back to each other. I'll do it, Sarah said. She pulled away from Karen and turned to Shaw. Ma'am, I'll run the program. I'll train the candidates. I'll build something that lasts. Shaw nodded. Welcome back, Ghost. Karen looked between them. What program? What candidates? Shaw explained. Briefly, efficiently, the way admirals explain things. Karen listened, her face cycling through emotions like weather patterns over open water. Fear, pride, fear again, and then something that settled into her features like sunlight settling into a valley. Acceptance, not of the danger. A mother never accepts the danger, but of the daughter, of who she was, of what she was meant to do. Whatever you decide, Karen said to Sarah, I support you. Not because I understand it, because I trust you, and because your father would want you to keep going, even if it means I might not come home even then. Karen's voice was steady now, forged steady by the same fire that had forged her daughter. I spent 3 years trying to protect you from your father's legacy. All I did was push you away from the only person who could help you carry it. I won't make that mistake again. She took Sarah's hand. Be who you were meant to be, and let me be here to watch. 3 weeks later, as Sarah stood at the front of Training Bay 9 at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. The bay was cavernous concrete and steel, the kind of space that amplified sound and reduced humans to their essential elements. 35 women sat before her on metal folding chairs. They ranged in age from 19 to 29. Navy, Marine Corps, Army, Air Force. Every branch represented. Every background imaginable. They all had one thing in common. They wanted to be what Sarah was. My name is Petty Officer First Class Sarah Calloway. Her voice carried across the bay without effort. Not loud, but clear. The clarity of someone who had learned to make herself heard over gunfire and helicopter rotors and the screaming of men who were trying to kill her. Some of you may have seen video footage of me from a few weeks ago. Some of you may have read articles or heard rumors. So let me tell you what's true and what isn't. She paused. Let the silence build. I am a Navy SEAL, one of the first women to complete Bud/S and earn the Trident. I have deployed to combat zones on 4 continents. I have killed 23 people in defensive engagements. I have watched teammates die in my arms. 35 pairs of eyes stared at her. That's what's true. Now here's what isn't. I am not special. I am not superhuman. I am not blessed with some gift that makes me better than you. Everything I've accomplished. I accomplished through training, discipline, and refusing to quit when everything inside me screamed to give up. She pointed at a woman in the front row. Name, Petty Officer Second Class Lisa Pemberton, ma'am. Sarah's heart jumped. Lisa had requested transfer from Fort Braxton the day after the assessment ended, had shown up at Coronado 2 weeks later with a letter of recommendation from Colonel Dawson and the same fire in her eyes that Sarah recognized because she had once carried it herself. Why are you here, Pemberton? To become a SEAL, ma'am. Why? Because I watched you hold back when you could have destroyed someone. Because I spent 6 years being told what I can't do and you showed me every word of it was a lie. Sarah looked at the entire group. Most of you will not complete this program. Statistics say 90% will quit or be eliminated before the first phase ends. That's not because you're women, so every woman in that bay could see it, so. Every woman in that bay could see it. This is what you're fighting for. This piece of metal, it weighs about 2 ounces. It's worth nothing at any pawn shop. But it represents something that can't be bought or inherited or faked. It represents the willingness to suffer more than you thought possible for people you may never meet. She tucked the trident back. 0400 tomorrow. Be here or don't. The choice is yours. The first week broke 7 of them. Not physically. Mentally. The cold and the sleep deprivation and the constant pressure and the voice in their heads that said, quit. 7 listened to that voice. 7 rang the bell. Week 2 broke 5 more. Week 3 broke 4. And then came Hell Week. Sarah had designed the program herself, had poured everything she knew, everything her father had taught her, everything Somalia had carved into her into a curriculum that was merciless and fair in equal measure. She pushed them because the ocean would push harder. She broke them down because the enemy would try to break them worse. She demanded everything because special operations gave nothing to those who held anything back. 24 hours into Hell Week 12. Women remained. 12 out of 35. Battered, hypothermic, running on nothing but the stubborn refusal to let the bell win. And then it happened. The thing Sarah had feared more than any personal failure. Lisa Pemberton went down. It was hour 31. Surf torture. The candidates lying in the Pacific shallows, while waves broke over them, and the water temperature stripped heat from their bodies faster than their metabolisms could replace it. Standard Hell Week evolution. Brutal, but survivable for candidates whose core temperatures remained above 94 degrees. Lisa's dropped to 92. Sarah saw it in the way Lisa stopped shivering. Paradoxical warmth. The body giving up its fight against the cold and beginning the slow, quiet process of shutting down. Lisa's movements became sluggish. Her eyes glazed. Her responses to verbal commands delayed by seconds that stretched toward eternity. The medical team moved in with thermometers and warming blankets. Sarah moved faster. She knelt beside Lisa in the surf, the Pacific surging around them, cold salt water soaking through her clothes. Lisa's lips were blue, her skin the color of candle wax. Pemberton. Sarah's voice was sharp, commanding, the voice she used when lives were at stake. Look at me. Lisa's eyes found hers, unfocused, drifting. Core temp 91.8, the medic called out, and dropping. 30 seconds. Sarah had 30 seconds to make a decision that would define what kind of leader she was and what kind of program she was building. She could leave Lisa in, push through, trust that the medical team would intervene before permanent damage occurred. It was what the traditional BUD/S instructors would have done, what her own instructors had done to her, what the program demanded. Or she could pull her out, save her life with absolute certainty, and her candidacy with equal certainty. In those 30 seconds, Sarah saw her father, standing at a choke point between 2 mud brick walls in Syria, choosing to stay, choosing sacrifice, choosing the mission over himself because that was what warriors did. And she understood in a moment of clarity that felt like breaking through the surface of deep water into sunlight that her father's choice and her choice were not the same. William Calloway had sacrificed himself to save his team. Sarah was being asked to sacrifice someone else to preserve a standard. And those were fundamentally different things. Pull her out, Sarah said. Ma'am? The medic hesitated. Protocol says, pull her out now, that is an order. They pulled Lisa from the surf, wrapped her in thermal blankets, started warming procedures. Lisa's eyes found Sarah's as they carried her toward the medical tent. I can still go, Lisa whispered through chattering teeth. Don't pull me, I can still go. I know you can, that's not why I'm pulling you. Then why? Because keeping you alive matters more than keeping you in. You'll heal, you'll come back, and when you come back you'll be stronger than you are right now. But only if you're alive to do it. Lisa's eyes filled with tears that froze on her cheeks in the night air. That night, after the remaining 11 candidates had been secured in their barracks, and the medical team had confirmed that Lisa was stable, and recovering Sarah sat alone on the beach where BUD/S candidates had been broken and rebuilt for decades. She stared at the ocean, black water under black sky, the sound of waves hitting sand like a metronome counting time that nobody wanted to measure. Frank Owens found her there. He had retired from the Army 3 weeks after the assessment at Fort Braxton and had shown up at Coronado as a civilian instructor, saying that watching Sarah build something new was more meaningful than any retirement ceremony the Army could offer. You did the right thing, Owens said. Sarah didn't answer, pulling Pemberton. It was the right call. Was it Sarah's voice was hollow? Or did I pull her because I was afraid? Because I've already watched 2 people die under my command, and I couldn't handle a third. Does it matter? Of course it matters. If I pulled her out of fear instead of judgment, then I'm compromised. Then every decision I make for the rest of this program is suspect. Owen sat down beside her. The sand was cold. The ocean was loud. Your father stayed behind in Syria because he calculated that his life was worth less than his team's survival. That was judgment. Courage was just what made the judgment possible. He looked at her. You pulled Pemberton because you calculated that her life was worth more than her candidacy. Same kind of judgment. Different direction. Same clarity. Sarah was quiet for a long time. What if she can't come back? What if the hypothermia damaged something? What if I ended her career by trying to save her life? Then you saved her life. And she'll find another career. And she'll be alive to find it, because you made a hard call in 30 seconds that most people couldn't make in 30 days. He stood, brushed sand from his pants. Your father chose to stay because he believed his team was worth dying for. You pulled Pemberton out because you believed she was worth saving. Those aren't contradictions. They're the same commitment to other people's lives seen from different sides of the same coin. He walked away. Sarah sat on the beach until dawn. When the sun came up, she went back to work. Lisa Pemberton recovered in 9 days. On the 10th day, she requested reinstatement to the program. Medical cleared her. Sarah approved her. Lisa rejoined the class at the exact point where she had been pulled, as if the interruption had been nothing more than a pause between heartbeats. She didn't ring the bell. She didn't quit. She finished Hell Week with the other 11 candidates, and when it was over, she stood on that same beach wrapped in a blanket and sobbing with the relief that came from somewhere deeper than exhaustion. 6 months later, the graduation ceremony was small, intimate. 4 women stood at attention while Admiral Shaw pinned golden tridents onto their chests. Lisa Pemberton, a young Army sergeant named Mitchell, who had refused to quit despite 2 stress fractures. A Navy corpsman named Rodriguez, who had been told by her own family she was wasting her time. And a Marine captain named Brennan, who had nearly drowned during underwater demolition training and had come back the next day asking to do it again. 4 tridents. 4 women. The number of female SEALs in the United States Navy had just doubled. Karen Calloway sat in the front row. She had driven from San Diego that morning, arriving 2 hours early, sitting in that metal chair with the rigid posture of a woman determined not to cry, and the shining eyes of a woman who was going to cry anyway. Lisa turned to Sarah after the ceremony. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lisa saluted, not casually, formally. The kind of salute you give to someone who saved your life twice, once on a beach in the dark, and once by showing you who you could become. Thank you, ma'am, for everything. Don't thank me yet. You haven't deployed. You haven't seen what comes after the trident. When I do, I'll be ready. Because you made me ready. A letter arrived 3 days later. Forwarded through 3 different bases routed across 2 continents, delivered to Sarah's desk at Coronado, in a plain envelope with creased edges and a postmark from somewhere in East Africa. She opened it. Calloway. I don't know if you remember me. We met at Fort Braxton. I was the one who hit you in the mess hall. The one who spent 3 weeks proving that the worst kind of weakness is the kind that disguises itself as strength. I've been thinking about what you said. About getting bitter or getting better. About the choice being the only thing that matters. I chose better. Last month, my team responded to a village attack. Insurgents had taken hostages. 17 civilians, including 8 children. We had orders to wait for backup. Backup was 6 hours away. The insurgents were going to start killing people at dawn. I didn't wait. 4 of us against 23 of them. We got all 17 out. No friendly casualties, no civilian deaths. The after-action report calls it a success. The citation calls it heroism. I know what it really was. It was me finally becoming what I always pretended to be. A man who protects instead of dominates. A man who uses his strength for something other than proving he has it. You did that, not by beating me, by offering me your hand afterward. Jake Harmon. Sarah read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it and placed it in a wooden box she kept in her quarters. The same box that held Danny Hargrove's dog tags and Ryan Foley's memorial coin and the last letter her father had written home before Syria. The box of people who had shaped her. the box of debts she carried, and legacies she honored. She added Jake Harmon to the list. 1 year later, Sarah stood at a podium in front of 300 people. The Naval Special Warfare community had gathered to recognize the program's success. 12 women had earned tridents under Sarah's watch. 12 doors opened. 12 barriers broken. Admiral Shaw introduced her. "It is my honor to present the Naval Special Warfare Instructor of the Year Award to Petty Officer First Class Sarah Calloway. In 2 years, she has transformed our integration program from a theoretical experiment into a proven pipeline. She has trained more female SEALs than any other instructor in history, and she has done it while maintaining the highest standards our community demands." Applause. Sarah walked to the podium, looked out at the faces watching her. Lisa was there. Second deployment done. Already being talked about as one of the best operators on her team. Owens was there, retired now, showing up at every graduation ceremony with the quiet persistence of a man who had found in Sarah's program something he thought he had lost. Karen was there, front row, tears already falling. "I didn't ask for this," Sarah said. The room went silent. 2 years ago, I was hiding, running from what I was, trying to find peace by pretending I was something I wasn't. And then a man hit me in a mess hall, and everything changed." She paused. "That man taught me something. Not intentionally, but he showed me that hiding doesn't work, that you can't escape who you are by wearing someone else's face, that sooner or later the truth comes out, and when it does, you'd better be ready to stand behind it." She looked at the trident on her chest. "My father told me once that the measure of a warrior isn't the battles they win, it's the warriors they leave behind." I didn't understand what he meant. Not until I watched my first class graduate. Not until I pinned a trident on a woman who told me she wanted to be like me and realized that she already was. She found Lisa in the crowd. "That's the legacy I want to leave. Not kills, not missions, not the number of men I've put down or the number of buildings I've cleared. Women who will carry this forward long after I'm gone. Women who will train the next generation, who will train the generation after that, until the idea of a female SEAL isn't remarkable anymore, until it's just normal, until no one blinks." She straightened. "I'm not done. None of us are. There are more barriers to break, more doors to open, more women waiting for someone to show them that the impossible is just a word people use when they've stopped trying." She raised her hand in salute. "To the women who came before me and made this possible. To the women standing beside me who are making it real. And to the women who will come after, who will take this further than any of us can imagine." She lowered her hand. "That is the mission. That is the legacy. And as long as I'm breathing, I will never stop fighting for it." The applause was thunderous, but Sarah wasn't listening. She was looking at the back of the room, where a young woman stood alone. Civilian clothes, dark hair, determined eyes. 18 years old, maybe 19. Tears streaming down her face. Her hands clasped in front of her with the intensity of someone holding on to something invisible and precious. The young woman caught Sarah's gaze across 300 people, held it. And in that moment, Sarah saw herself. The girl who had walked into a recruiting office on Rosecrans Street in a black dress carrying a folded flag, carrying grief, carrying a father's legacy and a mother's fear, and the unshakable belief that she was meant for something that didn't exist yet. The girl who had said then, "I'll be the first." The cycle was continuing. The legacy was growing. And somewhere in whatever came after the last breath and the last heartbeat, William Calloway was watching his daughter become what he had always known she would be. Not just a warrior, a builder of warriors. Not just a SEAL, something rarer. Someone who had walked through the fire and come back carrying a torch for those still finding their way in the dark. And her story was only beginning.